Today on The Report, we discuss the tragic Halloween stampede in Seoul, South Korea.
Plus, Bolsonaro's silence after Lula wins Brazil's presidential election, and the suspect in the Pelosi attack is charged with attempted kidnap and attempted murder.
Elon Musk begins making drastic changes after his purchase of Twitter.
Reports indicate that 9 mass shootings were carried out around the Halloween holiday. The report starts now.
Hello, I'm Enrique Medina.
I'm Anthony Bautista.
I'm Elmira Darmanian.
And I'm Amanda Nemec. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at The Report CSUF or on our Titan TV Instagram at Titan TV CSUF to keep in touch with us and view our new content.
On October 29th, a crowd of at least 100,000 people in the Itaewon neighborhood of Seoul, South Korea were celebrating Halloween festivities when they suddenly became trapped and crushed into a narrow alleyway. The deadly stampede killed at least 156 people and injured 150 others. Emergency workers and pedestrians rushed to perform CPR on people lying in the streets after the tragic accident. The chief of Seoul's Yongsan Fire Department said the bodies were sent to hospitals or a gym where bereaved family members could identify them. Most of the individuals present were in their 20s, and of the victims, 101 women were killed and 55 men. Many have been critical of the city's lack of security for the festivities, as authorities say they deployed 137 personnel to Itaewon that night, which is more than in previous years, but certainly not enough to handle a crowd of up to 100,000 people. According to officials, the police were deployed for crime prevention and not crowd control. The National Fire Agency said in a statement that once the incident was reported, all of Seoul's available emergency workers were mobilized. More than 1,700 response personnel from across the county were deployed, including about 520 firefighters, 1,100 police officers, and 70 government workers. The Seoul Metropolitan Government issued emergency text messages urging people in the area to return home swiftly. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol issued a statement calling for officials to ensure swift treatment of the injured and to review the safety of the festivity sites. He also introduced the health ministry to deploy disaster medical assistance teams and secure beds in nearby hospitals to treat the injured. The Halloween incident has become South Korea's deadliest disaster since the April 2014 ferry sinking, which killed mostly high schoolers, and the 2005 stampede that killed 11 people and injured 60 at a concert in the southern city of Sangju. Yes, so I wanted to ask you guys, do we think government officials, public officials, security, and the authorities handled this situation correctly? Or do we think this was something that just so happened to be more of a freak accident?
I honestly think it's a little bit of both. I think yes, in the sense it was so random, in an alleyway. It is a freak accident, but also we need to have more control and prepare for the worst outcomes when it comes to social events. This is not the first time that we've seen this, so I think that we definitely need to be more prepared. But what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, and one thing I do want to reiterate is that this was the first pretty much unmasked event in Seoul, South Korea that they've had since the pandemic started. So I'm not surprised that there was like a large amount of people who were celebrating Halloween weekend. But yeah, I agree, it's troublesome. And, I myself, if I was in that situation, I would personally be worried if there wasn't that many people on duty that night.
I agree. I think this was poorly planned on all facets just because I know the city said that they deployed 137 personnel members, but for a crowd of 100,000 people, that's just simply not enough. So to put 100,000 people in an alleyway, that doesn't sound like a very good idea either. So I think this was poorly planned all around, and this probably could have been avoided.
I 100% agree with you, and I also think the amount of times we've talked about events that are supposed to be fun, but then they end up in something being a tragedy, I think definitely this should be more controlled.
I agree. I think that's very heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to all the families that have been affected by this, because they shouldn't have to worry about their family member not coming home from social events. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has won Brazil's presidential election, and the defeated Jair Bolsonaro has yet to officially concede his loss in the election. In Brazil, it is a tradition for the losing candidate to phone the winner and to make a statement acknowledging their defeat. But Bolsonaro has remained silent for 2 days. The far-right president was said to have gone to sleep after narrowly losing to his left-wing arch-rival. After 2 days of silence, many were concerned that this could mean that he would not accept the result, as he has vocally doubted the voting system in the past. Bolsonaro has previously made combative statements about his hold on the country, such as that, quote, only God, end quote, would be able to remove him from office. Because of this, many were nervously awaiting his public appearance. However, on Tuesday, November 1st, Bolsonaro finally had a press conference and made a brief, ambiguous statement saying, quote, as president and as a citizen, I will continue to follow all the commandments of our Constitution, end quote. He did not mention the election winner by name or acknowledge his defeat, but his chief of staff spoke afterwards, confirming that the president has authorized him to begin the transition process. The results of the election showed Lula had 50.9% valid votes against Bolsonaro, who had 49.1%. During his victory speech, Lula mentioned the political rift that runs through Brazil, which has now become more tense because of this election. Lula stated, quote, this country needs peace and unity. This population doesn't want to fight anymore, end quote. He promised to govern for all of Brazil, not just those who voted for him. There have been some protests from Bolsonaro supporters, such as lorry drivers who blocked roads in at least 13 states. But several of them have now been cleared. Lula now faces a 2-month transition period until he is due to be sworn in on January 1st. So now I want to ask you guys, what do you guys think Bolsonaro's statement means?
I personally think, I feel like he may be accepting defeat, but just doesn't want to let it out there. He is the incumbent, and knowing that part of it, he might have just like this big sense of pride, and considering he's been the president before, maybe it's just more the sense of not wanting to accept defeat. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think that he is planning something. I think he might pull a Trump and try to fight back, maybe even recount the ballot, you know? It's not normal that, you know, once you lose, that you don't somewhat, you know, congratulate the winner to a degree. So I think that he might be planning something, but I don't know.
I could see that as a possibility, but I did read an article that mentioned that he did talk to the Supreme Court people in Brazil, and pretty much from what the reporters, the media, the press asked the Supreme Court judges, it sounds like he pretty much told them that he's throwing in the towel and accepting defeat. The fact that he still hasn't said it publicly, though, still kind of creates a sense of doubt to see if he's actually going to give in. So it'll be interesting to really monitor that situation as it goes forward.
It sounds awfully familiar to a lot of Americans. This was something similar to what we experienced when we were going through our transitional period with presidents. This is very strange, though. Very, very strange. I don't quite understand the method behind this, because while, yes, he might have lost the presidential election, three of the governors in the most populous states in Brazil are a part of his right-wing party, as well as many members of Congress. So it's not a complete loss for him. So I'm a little bit confused as to why this is taking so long. So now, in terms of the future, my next question for you guys is, what do you think Lula's win means for the country of Brazil?
Yeah, so I do think it means a shift into more of a democracy. Just to put things into perspective, Brazil is a relatively younger democracy. They actually had been in dictatorship up until 1985. So another really interesting thing to mention is that in Latino America, it's actually been a shift that we've been seeing in other countries as well. Both Mexico, Peru, Colombia, Honduras, and other countries have also shifted to more of a democratic state of power. So I think that's really the big picture when it comes to this presidency. So kind of going away from more of that dictatorship style. So I do think it's a very great win, in particular for the people of Brazil.
I definitely think this new leader is going to have a lot of great ideas and hopefully bring some unity back to the country. On Monday, October 31st, David DePape 42 was charged with a litany of crimes, including assault, attempted murder, and attempted kidnapping, after breaking into Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and her husband Paul Pelosi's residence in San Francisco on Friday, October 28th. DePop broke a window to enter the house and apparently called out asking for Nancy Pelosi. Unaware that she was in Washington, D.C. at the time, he then engaged in a struggle with Mr. Pelosi, which ended with DePop striking Mr. Pelosi with a hammer as police arrived at the property. The 82-year-old was hospitalized with a skull fracture and injuries to his hands and right arm. Luckily, doctors expect Mr. Pelosi to make a full recovery. DePop was found to have a second hammer, rope, and a roll of tape with zip ties in his possession upon arrest. According to officials, DePop said in a voluntary interview with San Francisco police that he planned to hold Nancy Pelosi hostage, interrogate her, and torture her. DePop told authorities in a federal affidavit, quote, if Nancy were to tell him the truth, he would let her go, and if she lied, he was going to break her kneecaps, end quote. DePop also told investigators that, quote, by breaking Nancy's kneecaps, she would have to be wheeled into Congress, which would show other members of Congress there were consequences to their actions, end quote. DePop was charged with 1 count of attempted kidnapping of a U.S. official and 1 count of assault on an immediate family member of a U.S. official. The charge carries a maximum sentence of 30 years in prison. The San Francisco District Attorney, Burke Jenkins, also said on October 31st that other charges against DePop included, quote, assault with a deadly weapon, elder abuse, false imprisonment of an elder, as well as threats to a public official and their family, end quote. According to Jenkins, DePop is facing 13 years to life in prison. Jenkins also believes that the Pelosi attack was, quote, politically motivated, end quote, as a review of DePop's online accounts showed that he was involved in the world of far-right conspiracies, anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, and hate speech. I mean, this is tragic news that we're hearing about. What do you think this means for our political leaders and their safety and how we can move forward?
Yeah, I do think with midterm elections coming up specifically, I do think that knowing the nature of the situation, I do think, we talked about security before in our first story, so I think that's going to come into question again. I feel like we're going to need to employ more security guards, especially during the voting process, because we know people like DePop can really go off on whether it be people working in the voting areas, things like that. We just need to be careful and it's really unfortunate, the situation, but it also alerts us with the upcoming elections that we need to be careful.
Yeah, this is an example of somebody that's just completely gone off the rails. As you mentioned, he was into conspiracy theories, the super far right wing, alt, all that stuff. And that's dangerous. As we can see, like this quite literally was an act of terrorism almost. It's dangerous, it's harmful, and it taints politics in America. It makes it look like something that shouldn't be violent, something that shouldn't be taken in this context.
And you know what? Given the January 6th attacks from last year, and given this, it seems like almost similar to the school shooting situation where it keeps happening and happening, that it feels like it's almost starting to get normalized, and it shouldn't. That's why I think we need to make sure we take the measures to protect both our citizens who are going to vote in the midterm elections and our political leaders as much as possible.
I think just political leaders should be more cautious, especially leaders like Nancy Pelosi. We've talked about her visit to Armenia and we know what kind of statements she usually made. She's not afraid. So I think definitely all the political leaders should be more cautious with their safety, especially in this period of time.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on January 6th, the attack on the Capitol, I think that really opened up some unwanted doors just for, far-right extremists, kind of like this, to really look at the situation and say, hey, this is a new outlet. This is a new thing that people can do to attack politicians, which is just not okay.
Yes, I definitely think that attacking politicians is not okay, and it is not something that should be done. Elon Musk has officially acquired Twitter for $44 billion and is already making some divisive changes. The Tesla and SpaceX CEO has been quite the subject for controversy in recent years, primarily due to his no-filter mentality. When it comes to his online conduct, he's been known to frequently post memes, manipulate the crypto and stock market, and openly speak out against current events or those in power. After assuming control over the popular social media platform, it's really no surprise that Musk has been quick to take drastic action. His first move was to immediately dissolve Twitter's board of directors in order to have sole influence over the future decision-making. He followed this up by posting a video of himself entering Twitter headquarters carrying a sink in hand. The tweet read, quote, "Entering Twitter HQ, let that sink in," end of quote. Twitter advertisers have been uncertain as to how the interface will change under Musk's control. Musk had emphasized a vision to further promote free speech, rethink content moderation policies, and undo permanent bans of controversial figures. During the first 24 hours of his ownership, there were several accounts of increased racist comments, hate speech, and objectionable content evident, almost as if to test his sincerity. Some partners have decided to cut ties until there is more clarity on the situation, as most prefer to not have their ads associated with potentially toxic content. Exiting their relationship with the platform could pose them as anti-free speech, but there are also brand risks involved in appearing to implicitly endorse unfiltered and possibly harmful content. Given that advertising brings in about 90% of the site's revenue, Musk will have to find a healthy balance between his own ideals and the interests of all other parties that make up the platform. If not, he may risk running the company into the ground. Do you guys think that unfiltered free speech on the internet is a negative or positive thing in regards to the story?
Ultimately, it's up to these companies to decide what they're okay with on their sites because they're privatized companies. But at the end of the day, just because you're allowed free speech doesn't mean you can say whatever you want without consequences. There's always consequences for any action, good or bad.
Yeah, and that includes things like cyberbullying and leaking out information and things like that. So I'm a little nervous about how things could run with Elon Musk now head in charge. We've seen that he's already fired the board of directors and things like that. So it's showing that he's really, I don't know if abusing the power is the right word right now, but it's showing that, he's willing to make drastic changes, which is a nerve-wracking thing.
Do you guys think he will improve the platform in any way, or he will just make the changes that will make no sense to us, and then we will see if they were positive or negative?
I feel like everybody's kind of just like in this waiting game to see what happens, because it really could go either way. I mean, we've seen Elon Musk do some really great things with Tesla, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see. What do you guys think?
Yeah, and I think one of those questionable ideas that we've already seen is the new aspect of Twitter Blue, which you would essentially be paying $8 per month to have that blue verification checkmark. So I think that also brings up the questions, who do you trust on the platform? Because that brings up the question of who is a reliable source and who isn't.
And misinformation was already a big problem on Twitter and almost every other social media platform. So giving somebody the opportunity to have a blue verification badge can help spread misinformation even faster than ever before, which is a huge problem, especially for us as journalists, because now somebody can pay for that badge and imitate a journalist or a news outlet or anything like that and spread misinformation however they please.
Well, I guess we're going to let it sink in, and let's stay tuned with that.
Yeah, let that sink in, Honestly, let's just hope that Twitter moves in the right direction. Reports indicate that 9 mass shootings were carried out around the Halloween holiday. From Friday the 28th through Tuesday, November 1st, at least 10 people have been killed and 46 were injured. Although Halloween comes with the thrill of dressing up and letting loose with friends, the time of year can also be equally as dangerous, as it is fun as well. Police often have trouble keeping crime to a minimum, with so many people taking the streets during all hours of the night. And this year proved to be no different. The Gun Violence Archive, or GVA, a nonprofit research organization that tracks casualties from police statements and news reports, identified 9 mass shootings spanning Florida to California. GVA defines mass shooting as, quote, one in which 4 or more people are shot or killed, not including the shooter, end quote. These occurrences took place in locations such as Chicago, Kansas City, Manhattan, North Raleigh, and Houston. While some mass shootings catch national attention, some, as defined by the GVA, go relatively unnoticed outside of the affected communities. Across Chicago alone, 35 victims were shot and 5 were killed over Halloween weekend, according to police. Among the tragic occurrences was a drive-by in Chicago's West Side that injured at least 14 people, 3 of which were young children. In Kansas City, 1 teen was killed and 7 others were shot when a group of uninvited guests opened fire at a Halloween house party. In Houston, Texas, Takeoff, who made up 1/3 of the popular rap group Migos, also fell victim on Halloween night at 2:30 a.m. in the morning. Police were called to the crime scene at a downtown bowling and pool hall. The 28-year-old rapper was found deceased and 2 other victims were rushed to a nearby hospital. Investigations into many of the fatal situations are still ongoing. Our thoughts and prayers do go out to any victims as well as their loved ones caught up in this senseless violence. So knowing the rise of crime essentially elevates during this time, what are some things that police and maybe government officials should do to make sure that it's really not an issue during Halloween weekend?
For me, I think there's a lot happening on that weekend leading it up to Halloween night. So it's really hard for everything to be controlled in one certain place. The best thing to do is just be aware of your surroundings. I feel like in buddy system, why not? Just always have the buddy system. Don't go trick-or-treating by yourself. Always make sure you're with your friends, people you trust, and stay aware.
In terms of what the police can do, I think there's only so much. There's always increased presence and you can always send more people to patrol. But at the end of the day, a lot of these crimes were just senseless, heat of the moment, and a lot of young people. And the worst part about this, like you mentioned, a lot of it goes relatively unnoticed outside of the communities that are affected by it, which is sad. That kind of goes to show how almost desensitized the majority of the country has become to these mass shootings, which is probably the saddest part of this whole thing.
Yeah, you're right. And another danger to mention is that during Halloween time, drunk driving goes up a little bit, because of the Halloween parties and such. So I also think just us as civilians need to make sure we do our part and, call an Uber if it means that we were drinking. That way we can avoid eventually ending someone's life. So I do think us as citizens have that responsibility as well, on top of government authorities, to make sure that we're as safe as possible.
The saddest part for me that you mentioned was that children were also victims, which is very surprising. Imagine wanting to have a good time as a child, going to trick-or-treating, and then something bad happens. I don't think anybody will like to celebrate Halloween after that, but I hope next time will be better. And as you've mentioned, we should take responsibility and especially take care of kids, because for them it's just a holiday, and we are, as adults, are more aware of what can happen.
The LGBTQ Resource Center recently celebrated its 10-year anniversary at the Goleher Alumni House. Several guest speakers were present to share their experience and honor the accomplishments achieved by the community. The celebration occurred during the end of LGBTQ History Month, which commemorates the LGBTQ community and its history. Students and staff celebrated with music by DJ Rose and danced with drag queen Sabrina. The center's senior coordinator, Nat Betancourt Ariano, gave an opening speech about the importance of the anniversary, stating, quote, "To celebrate queer and trans joy is so important, and I want you to know that who you are and how you express yourself is so impactful," end quote. Prior to the center's founding in 2012, there were only student-run organizations for the queer community. The center's establishment was significant because it was officially supported by the school and it provided an established space for the community to convene. Ariano spoke about their experiences at CSUF and the center, saying, quote, "It wasn't until I came here to Cal State Fullerton that I was able to meet folks that were just like me. I felt empowered to really embrace who I always was," end quote. Craig Lofton, a lecturer in the American Studies Department, spoke about the importance of recognizing and representing queer history, saying that many students within Orange County grow up without ever learning anything about it, and many queer people have to go find it on their own. Ariano ended the ceremony by stating, quote, "So today we honor our past, we embrace our present, and we look forward to the future, through our experiences and reflection of those who are rooted in the community with us," end quote.
And with that, that's all we have time for today.
Have a good week, everyone.
And stay tuned for more news, views, and info.
We'll see you next time on The Report.